All right, Dane, it's playoff week. We got 4 huge matchups in the first round of the college football playoff. We're going to dive into all of that. Alabama, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Tulane, Oregon, JMU, as well as Miami, Texas A&M. For my money, the one that I'm looking forward to the most, just for the sheer amount of NFL talent on both sides of the ball. But before we dive into these first round matchups, it is that fun time of year we've been alluding to, right? Where the transfer portal's not open, but the vast majority of the college football world is done playing for the season. And that means movement. That means rumors, transfers, declarations for the NFL. We're already seeing announcements that guys have accepted Senior Bowl and Shrine Bowl invites. We're seeing announcements that guys are staying in school. So before we dive into the game previews, I wanted to take the top of the show for a little bit of housekeeping about that, and particularly what it means for this quarterback class, because we say it all the time, quarterbacks drive draft class conversations, and we're starting to get an idea of what's going to happen with some of these guys we've been talking about through the course of the season, at least the ones that are done playing, because obviously there are a few big prospects in the field. But what are we hearing about everybody else?
Well, I think the main domino is going to be Dante Moore, right? Oregon quarterback. Remember last year at this time when uh, Drew Aller announced that he was returning to school, and it felt like it was a Penn State kind of nudge him, like, "Hey, just go announce it." Let's. They kind of pressured him to do it, just so they could go after guys in the portal and they could sell Penn State with Aller at the forefront. When in reality, Aller was keeping his mind wide open all the way through until the deadline. If he doesn't throw that last minute interception against Notre Dame, instead maybe it's a last minute touchdown, things might have gone differently. And so with Dante Moore, it's going to be a similar spot where I'm sure he's going to want to keep his options open until the end of the season. Just let's wait and see how the playoff goes, and before we make a final decision. So that might not be till mid-January. That puts Oregon at a little bit of a tough spot when, there's going to be players like Sam Levitt and others where if Moore is not going to be there, they need to go after some of these guys. And so the calendar is kind of in a weird spot. We got some news the last few days. A couple dominoes coming back. LaNorris Sellers, South Carolina. Arch Manning, Texas. I think both expected, right? Arch Manning especially. I think from the really September, we've kind of said he's a 2027 prospect, not a 2026 prospect. And if he came out, he still would have been a top 10 pick because it's Arch Manning, and that's how there's enough quarterback desperate teams where that's just how this works. But I think he's making the right move, going back, and now if you're Steve Sarkisian, do whatever you can, make sure Trevor Goosby's back at left tackle, Wisner's back, tight ends back. Like, just make sure you bring the band back on offense so you can surround your quarterback with the best possible talent to develop. And then LaNorris Sellers is a little bit different. I think you and I both agreed he should be back in college, but is South Carolina really the best spot for him? Like, that was open for interpretation. And I mean, it's going to be costly to keep him. Does South Carolina still have any money left in the till to go pay offensive linemen, go pay to upgrade the talent around Sellers? I mean, that's kind of the big question mark there. But at least we have some answers, some, a direction that he's headed, so we can kind of cross him off the list for this draft class.
It's going to be interesting to see how that works out with a school like South Carolina, because I mean, we're seeing it every single year, the effect that NIL has. I mean, obviously you want to put your quarterback in a situation to be successful, but you want to keep your quarterback happy as well. I mean, South Carolina, who can they retain from that offense? I assume Nick Harbor is going to be part of this moving forward. They're going to manage to keep him around. I know they swapped out their offensive line coach at the end of the regular season. So I'm curious
Kendall
to see them.
Briles,
Yeah,
he's a new offensive coordinator. Yep.
brought in a new offensive coordinator. I'm curious to see how far can you go to make this better for LaNorris Sellers. And if LaNorris Sellers wasn't confident that it was going to be better, would he be so quick to say he's staying around? So it very much starts to feel professional, which isn't surprising given the amount of money that's involved.
Well, that's money talks, and I mean, he's a South Carolina kid. His brother plays there. Like there's a lot of things, pulling at the heartstrings to go back instead of working the market and seeing what else was out there. Now, is that what's best for his long-term development? Time will tell. But this opens, the door for some of these other underclassmen quarterbacks to potentially enter this draft and be a top 5 quarterback in the 2026 class. And specifically talking about Brendan Sorsby from Cincinnati and Darian Mensah from Duke. And let's just say, for argument purposes, let's say Dante Moore declares, and let's say Ty Simpson goes back to school. So that means quarterback 3 is wide open. And both Sorsby and Mensah, I think that they look at that and say, all right, well, maybe do we strike while the iron's hot here? Sorsby, their report came out this week that he's either going to transfer or he's going to go pro. And I was talking to someone close to him, and he said it's about 60-40 that he's going to stay in school and transfer. Now I get the feeling that he would really like to go pro. But if the feedback he's getting, because it all depends on the NFL feedback. If he feels good that he could be in that Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck range, 25 to 50, I bet he's going. But I think NFL grades tend to be conservative when we talk about underclassmen. And so I think he's going to get plenty of day 2 feedback. I just don't know if it's going to be top 50 feedback. And based on the scouts that I've talked to, they all like him. It's just not first round right now. And so regardless, Sorsby's going to be well compensated wherever he plays next year. I was told by someone involved in the Sorsby process that the offers on the table right now, it's in the $4 to $5 million range from other programs to transfer. So
Whoa.
the NIL space is it's busy, and it's very lucrative right now, which is crazy compared to what we've seen in past years.
I love that for a few reasons, and it perfectly illustrates what we've talked about all year. For starters, $4 to $5 million is absolutely lucrative enough to keep a guy in school if he's not convinced he's going to be a slam dunk, no doubt about it, top 15, top 20 pick. On top of that, how could these other dominoes affect a guy like Sorsby, where let's say, and if I had to say right now, before we've played a single playoff game, I would guess Dante Moore goes pro. But what if, for whatever reason, Oregon is able to convince him to stay? And who's better equipped to convince a guy to stay in school than Oregon, by the way, and all of that Nike money that they have access to? So that is plausible. We'll see what Ty Simpson does. But if Sorsby winds up in a situation where he could be QB2, QB3 behind Fernando Mendoza and not a whole lot else, that changes the math completely, don't you think?
Probably. Last year we only had one quarterback go in the top 20, right? And there were several quarterback desperate teams. The Browns and plenty of teams that would have drafted Cam Ward if the Titans did not draft him at number 1 overall. The Browns would have taken him. The Raiders would have taken him. I mean, there were plenty of teams that would have drafted him. So I think that it's not a foregone conclusion that if Moore goes back, Ty Simpson goes back, Mensah goes back, that all of a sudden we can pencil Sorsby into the first round. But to your point, it does kind of change the outlook of how we stack these guys and where we could see Sorsby realistically going. That's part of this process that we're kind of working through right now. And let's include Mensah as part of this, who I think that we kind of we haven't talked a ton about him this year. I think we expected him to go back to school, and I still think that's the favorite to outcome here. He's a talented guy, and I mean, watching him against Virginia in the ACC title game, I mean, he uncorked a few throws that were like, all right, yeah, that'll play on Sundays. I don't think he's top 50 yet. I mean, I just don't think he's there. And that's the feedback I've gotten from scouts as well. So, I think he's kind of in that Sorsby conversation in terms of that tier of quarterback where you can see the talent. It's just, do they really think they can get pushed up because this is a weaker quarterback class? Is this a strike while the iron's hot type of situation? I would say regardless, you're getting paid really good money to go back to school and develop. And I get it. Like, you want to, if you have a chance to be a top 40, top 50 pick, like that's a lot of money. And you're 1 year closer to free agency. And like, I get that. But the long term outlook for you playing the hardest position in the sport, if you have a chance to go back to school and get paid life-changing money and still develop and get better, and yeah, you know what? It might not work out. It could be a Garrett Nussmeier situation where, you might actually hurt yourself by going back to school. Drew Aller, same type of deal. So nothing's guaranteed. But at the same time, we've seen the opposite. Cam Ward was like that. Jaden Daniels was like that, where they went back to school and improved their draft stock in a big way. So there's plenty of examples on both sides of the coin. And so I think it's really going to come down to these two guys and get as much NFL information as possible. But at the end of the day, I just don't think they're going to get enough that's going to say, yeah, they're going to be top 50 picks. And so now Dante Moore is different, obviously. I throughout most of the season, I was told Dante Moore, he's got a good situation. The family's comfortable staying another year. Like that was kind of how they felt. But Will Stein moving on, offensive coordinator, that's a needle mover. And could that alter just how they're thinking about moving forward, and how the playoff works out? That'll play a factor as well. How Oregon performs these next few weeks, these next few games, that'll absolutely be a factor in all this. So basically, long story short, there's a lot of moving pieces here that we have some information, but it's a lot is in the air that could change over these next few weeks.
I know they get paid a lot of money, but I don't envy a guy like Dan Lanning in this situation where you have to juggle preparing for a playoff run while also trying to keep next year's roster in place and coming up with contingency plans if you can't do that. That sounds exhausting. Mensah, I'm glad we shouted that out. I'll be perfectly honest. He was on my radar last year because he played
Mhm.
for a Tulane program that's won a lot of games, and he played well against Kansas State and Oklahoma in the early going of last year. And he kind of dropped off the radar at Duke, it felt like, up until they wound up in the ACC championship game. So I'm glad we took the time to point out what's going on with him and what the future might hold for him. Two thoughts. One, Dante Moore, obviously, he had the moment against Penn State earlier in the year. They lose to Oregon at home quickly after that. And
Indiana,
not
yeah.
to, or excuse me,
Yep.
he plays for Oregon. They lose to
Yeah.
Indiana. Not to say that he's like been off the radar, but I do think he's fallen off the national consciousness a bit. And now that, like, we know the deal with Fernando Mendoza, right? I don't think there's a whole lot of guesswork about what the future holds for him. But for Dante Moore to have this uncertainty and about to be playing in very big spotlight standalone national TV games, the dialogue about him is about to get super duper loud. And speaking of super duper loud, I'm already fascinated by the Arch Manning return because I can already see there are going to be so many people that are mad about the hype that he gets heading into next season. And very quietly, he's been playing pretty good football since like late October. And so I think it's completely justifiable to be excited about Arch Manning for 2026. I also think a boatload of people are not going to want to hear that after the way this season started out for him.
Anybody that watched the second half of that A&M Texas game, I mean, I don't know how you couldn't have optimism for Arch Manning and just his trajectory. And it's shocker. He was average as a first year starter, and guys get better. Like that's how playing quarterback works. That's how playing any sport works. And so he saw a lot of things this past year for the first time. He'll be better for it next year with a full off season with that under his belt. So yeah, I mean, I'm already envisioning my way too early 2027 mock draft in late April after the 2026 draft, and Arch is going to be a high up there. We already know that, but which other quarterbacks will be in there too? Will Dante Moore be in there? It's going to be interesting. Moore's 20 years old. He's a young player, and there's I think a lot of factors here for him. I don't even know how to put a percentage on it, like which way he's leaning, because I think in October felt pretty good. He was going back, But I do think that offensive coordinator move, that again, that's a needle mover. That's something that will make him think long and hard about this decision.
There are going to be so many more twists and turns to all of this just in the next 3 to 4 weeks. We'll make sure we keep an eye on it. But for the time being, we do have 4 big playoff games to preview. We're going to take an early break so we can dive into all of that without any interruptions. We'll be right back.
This episode of the Athletic Football Show is brought to you by our friends at Facebook. Every year around the holidays, there's that moment when you realize you want your gifts to actually mean something. Not just another item off a list, but something that shows you really get the person you're giving it to. And that's kind of what Facebook's reminding us all this season. It's not just about staying connected online. It's about embracing all possible connections that Facebook unlocks. Maybe you're doing a Secret Santa at work, and you scroll through your coworker's Facebook profile and notice they're a huge vinyl fan. Next thing you know, you're on Marketplace, finding that vintage jersey signed by your favorite player from a local seller. Or maybe you join a group where people share their favorite gift ideas or the best spots to see holiday lights around town. Those small moments, a comment, a message, an idea you stumble onto, can end up becoming something bigger. That's what Facebook's all about this season, reminding us that a little connection goes a long way. So whether you're finding the perfect gift, reconnecting with an old friend, or just sharing a little holiday spirit, Facebook is where those connections start. Let's reconnect this holiday season with Facebook.
All right, Dane, let's get to the games. And you know what? We'll just do it in chronological order. We got 4 big ones starting on Friday night, and I love that we're starting with one of the best ones. Number 9 Alabama heading to Norman to face number 8 Oklahoma. Battle of SEC teams, rematch of SEC teams. Oklahoma beat the Tide in Tuscaloosa not all that long ago, and we'll see how this goes. Obviously, there was some degree of consternation about Alabama getting this spot over Notre Dame after the way their SEC championship went against Georgia. But for our purposes, this is still an Alabama roster with a ton of NFL talent, including one of the biggest quarterback dominoes of this cycle in Ty Simpson. So where do you want to start? Do we start there, or do you want to go somewhere else?
Well, I think it's just, first off, it's interesting that this is a rematch from not that long ago, mid-November.
Like 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. So this is 2 teams that are very familiar with each other. Oklahoma won that game in Tuscaloosa. So what's going to be different in round 2 in Norman? It's going to be, there's going to be weather will be more of a factor in this one. In terms of who needs a big game, I think we look at both quarterbacks, right? I mean, that's not really going out on a limb here to say that both quarterbacks need big games to not only win, but just in the eyes of NFL teams. Ty Simpson, we've talked about it. First year as a starter, first 2 months looked great. Then since Halloween, it's been a little bit downhill. And I think it's a tough ask for everything going around him for him to just be the deodorant and make it all better, because there's only so much you can do when the blocking is below average and there's no run game and the receivers aren't helping you out a ton. But at the same time, scouts want to see you overcome these challenging situations. And so at the very least, Ty Simpson, don't turn the ball over. He has 5 turnovers the last 4 games. And that's something it popped up the last time these 2 teams faced. That is something that he must improve and be better at in general, but especially if they want to win this game. And then also lump Mateer in this conversation, a guy that we thought in September, okay, we've got a newcomer on this in this quarterback discussion. But after he had that hand injury, needed the surgery, since he's come back, it's has not looked great. He has more interceptions than passing touchdowns since he came back. There's the last, I think, 7 games. And look, I mean, the Sooners, they win with defense and then just making enough plays on offense. And so Isaiah Satania, when they've needed a big play, it's the wide receiver coming up big. And can Mateer, Satania, can they find a connection that's going to, give them the advantage? Deion Burks kind of waited for him to make some plays, which it's been a little bit underwhelming for him this year. I think we thought maybe he could sneak in that top 50, top 60. He just hasn't played to that level this year. But, at the same time, they need these receivers to step up. Satania I think nobody in the college football playoff has more catches of 20-plus yards than Satania. So that's going to be for Alabama. If you want to shut down this offense, making sure that he doesn't get behind you deep down the field, that's going to be a big part of this.
I would love to see something resembling the John Mateer that we watched in the first 5-6 weeks of the season, because there's no denying that he just wasn't the same caliber of player after he came back from that injury. Is it all because of the hand injury? Is it because it gets harder as you go and defenses get more tape on you? Probably a little bit of both, but I'm really hoping that some time off can do some wonders here, really for both rosters, right? Like, obviously, you're beat to hell
Mhm.
by the end of a 12 game season, and even if it's not your traditional bowl break that we're so used to seeing from the old days, where you get 5 weeks off, but 2 weeks of time to prep and rest, I'm hoping can go a long way toward making both of these teams look better, but specifically both of these quarterbacks.
No doubt, and I mean, just trying to get an update on some of these injuries, it doesn't sound like LT Overton is gonna play, so that's a big loss for Alabama, a player that could very well go in the top 50 this year, so that's definitely something to watch. Josh Suavis, the Alabama tight end, he's been one of the better risers this year among the senior class of tight ends. This tight end class is loaded, man. Like, I'm seeing some of the guys get invited to the Senior Bowl at tight end, I'm like, wow, okay. So that means, if they only invite 8 guys, like, who's going to get left out here? Same with the Shrine. Like, there's only so many chairs and more draftable tight ends. So it's a really deep group, and he's a part of that. He missed. He didn't play in the conference championship game, so it sounds like he could be back. He's in a mid round pick, so that'll be big. But yeah, it's a great point. Just having a little bit of time off, getting right, getting healthy. That'll be a big part of both these teams and what they put on the field on Friday night.
I have two other questions for you in this game. And we've talked about this guy several times over the course of the year, but I wanted to do a check in after watching him be one of the only bright spots for Alabama in the SEC championship game. What are your feelings on where Germie Bernard falls right now in this receiver class? Because it certainly seems like he has become a consistent bright spot for this Alabama offense, despite being pretty significantly billed below Ryan Williams, at least in the public consciousness.
Yeah, and with Bernard, it's like he doesn't do anything amazing, right? It's just he does everything really well, and that's music to the ears of Tennessee. They love those guys where you can be, and he's good size, 6'1", 210 pounds, 9 3/4 inch hands. Line him up across the formation. He can play in the backfield. He's a really physical blocker. Like, his blocking tape is awesome, and so when you have a receiver that can wear a lot of different hats and is very reliable, no matter where you put him on the field, then that's something that is really appealing. And now he hasn't been the most productive this year. He hasn't had a 100-yard receiving game since the opener against Florida State. So and that's, I think, more of a product of the offense than just him specifically. But yeah, no doubt about it. Germie Bernard, if you're looking for a bright spot on that Alabama offense, definitely got to look at him.
It's funny, you're right. He doesn't have gaudy numbers at all, but every single week it seems, with the exception of the Iron Bowl, maybe, where he only had 3 catches for 24 yards, but every single week he's doing something and just playing good football. And I'll be honest, maybe some of this is colored by Ryan Williams not living up to the hype and the conversation that surrounded him after that amazing game against Georgia last year, where, yeah, like, Ryan Williams unquestionably might be the more talented player with the higher ceiling, but I find myself gravitating toward the guy who just does the little things consistently.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, if I had to win a game tomorrow, give me Jeremy Bernard 100 times out of 100 over Ryan Williams. And that's, I think you're not wrong. Like, yeah, Williams has a little more flash and home run ability, but I know what I'm getting with Bernard, and there is value in that. And so there's a lot of scouts that have second round grades on him. Could he be sneaking in that first round? Maybe for the right team. Chris Bell from Louisville, with the unfortunate ACL injury, that really puts Bernard as wide receiver 1 among the senior class at this point now. So, I think he's definitely a guy to watch. Can I interest you in a little bit of talking about this Alabama offense? Kadyn Proctor going up
Yes.
against
Yes.
This is like, and it's
Of course you can interest me in that.
We didn't get to see this last time. And so being able to just a dichotomy of a 6'7", 360-pound dancing bear versus a 6'1", 250-pound lightning bolt. Like, just the aesthetics of that is going to be a lot of fun. And, Proctor, it hasn't been perfect. It's been very inconsistent, but he hasn't given up a sack or committed a penalty since August, since the season opener. So it's not like it's been disaster level for Kadyn Proctor. It's just when you have such high hopes for a player and you look at him through a top 10 overall type of lens, then it's easy to nitpick a player like this because it can look sloppy at times. And it's not a talent issue. Because he's explosive. You see the movement skills. He has the strength where he can just manhandle opponents. It's the positional leverage. It's the timing. It's all these little inconsistencies that are the root of his problems and that lead to negative reps. How will he hold up against a guy like Thomas, who is better at the point of attack than most people think? He's active in the run game, but the reason why he's a potential top 40 pick is the disruptive ability as a pass rusher, his explosiveness, his flexibility. He can win high side. That burst to close is really impressive. I think we're really going to see Thomas, and now assuming that he plays, because I know he's been banged up, but assuming he plays, it sounds like he will. I think we're going to see him really rush upfield, and then set him up for those inside moves on those third downs, those obvious passing downs. So that is a matchup I cannot wait to watch.
For our purposes as people watching for the NFL, what else could you want than a situation like this? Kadyn Proctor, he's the most talked about offensive tackle going into the season. Didn't have a year overall that really lived up to the hype, and people are down on him as being some sort of top 10 prospect, but still probably a guy that's going to get drafted in the first round. And if he comes out after a couple weeks off and looks like that guy in the playoff, I mean, what a loud statement for a guy like him. And then, yeah, our Mason Thomas, he's only played 9 games this year, 6.5 sacks in those games, 3 multi-sack games over the course of the season. I still remember we talked about it at the time, but he was insane against Auburn for Oklahoma early on in this year. Just a guy that, at least at the college level, can take over a game as a pass rusher. So even if we only like just a handful of reps between these two guys, and if one of them has a great day, it's the type of thing that can really launch you into a conversation that maybe you weren't in earlier on in the season.
I think that's a great point about the playoffs as a whole. Just the stage that it brings. It's just another game. It's just another tape. We all know that's not true. And subconsciously, consciously, like it will be weighted a little bit differently in the eyes of scouts and NFL teams. And we saw the way Abdul Carter played in the playoff last year. Like, he was already one of the top players in the draft. That just kind of put an exclamation point on it. I think about Ohio State and all their players last year and what that meant for some of Donovan Jackson, the way he played down the stretch for Ohio State after Simmons at left tackle got hurt. And so Jackson so much was asked of him. He was the unsung hero of the Buckeyes national title run last year. It got him into the first round. So I think it's a great point to bring up. A guy like Proctor, who's really talented, scouts are looking for a reason to put a big grade on him. And if he's able to give it to them in the playoffs, I'll put it this way. He could go 9th. He could go 29th. Neither of those would surprise me. Just right now with what he's put on tape, a lot will depend on how this playoff plays out.
If he looks the part in 1 or 2 playoff games, I could see that tilting things toward the higher number very, very easily. Looking forward to that one. That's on Friday night. Perfect excuse to stay in and blow off your social calendar. And then on Saturday morning, which ESPN, you're not slick, by the way, ESPN. It's very, very smart on their part, but the 2 name brand games between the programs with all of the draft picks are happening in the windows where there's not an NFL game. There's 2 NFL games on Saturday in the late afternoon and in the evening. So you get Bama OU on Friday night, and then Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Central Time, we get Texas A&M and Miami. Feel like these teams just played in the regular season not all that long ago. Obviously, Miami getting the nod over Notre Dame from the selection committee. And like I said, there's reason for intrigue with all 4 of these games, but from a sheer standpoint of like number of prospects on the field, it feels like this is the leader in the clubhouse between the Hurricanes and the Aggies.
It really is. I think Ohio State will have the most draft picks this year. A&M is kind of right behind them. Maybe A&M and Indiana is kind of pushing for the second most draft picks this year. And A&M, they haven't had more than 7 draft picks in a single year since we moved to the 7-round format over 30 years ago. But good chance that changes this year. We talked about a pass rusher versus an offensive tackle with the first game. That's kind of the prospect matchup I can't wait to see in this one as well. Cashius Howell, the A&M pass rusher, against Miami right tackle Francis Mauigoa, who this could be a battle of first-round picks potentially. Well, with Howell, I think he's the guy that has a little bit more to prove. Being a later round pick coming into the year, and then everything he's done this year, putting himself in that top 50 conversation, leads the SEC in sacks. But scouts still want to see him be more as a run defender. They want to see him more in terms of the secondary moves. But love the burst. You love the ability to affect the game with that initial quickness. They just want to see a little bit more. And if he can do that, he can get himself in that first round. You look at all these offensive tackles that we've talked about, and we've mentioned it all year how it's been kind of disappointing, the offensive tackle class as a whole. But with Mauigoa, I mean, he's someone that is guard, tackle. We're going to be debating that all the way through till draft day.
I was about to ask you if you have an updated projection. Like, where do you stand now?
Me personally, I go back and forth and just asking scouts about their preference, they're split too. Some scouts are dead set on we're going to let him fail at tackle first. Other ones are saying his grade is so much higher at guard. We think he could be a tackle, but his grade is so much higher at guard that's where he is for us. And so I can really see both sides, and it might just depend on the situation. But this will be a great opportunity for him because there hasn't been a more consistent offensive tackle all year. The way he can stay square to rushers, his balance through contact, his ability to drop anchor and really halt guys that want to go speed to power. So I think the tackle guard debate will rage on the next few months. Will this performance and how he looks in this game, could that influence the decision? And remember, the last time we saw Howell, it wasn't a great game. It's probably his worst game of the year against Texas. Pretty quiet. Trevor Gooseby had a good game. So I think that, Howell's been sitting on that, and he wants to come out and really make a statement early.
And I mean, it's worth saying for the record, obviously, one game isn't going to completely outweigh your entire season of tape, but this is why these games are inflection points. Like, if you get a chance to go against somebody that is viewed as one of the top prospects, potentially at tackle, but at the very least, one of the best O-line prospects in the class. I mean, if you get your wins here and look like that type of guy, what a moment for Cashius Howell. But additionally, because I'm sure opinions are going to be split about Francis Mauigoa going into this draft cycle, if you put the clamps on an SEC sack leader, that could go a long way towards swaying opinions about what your ceiling is at the NFL level. And I tend to agree with NFL scouts, for the record. Considering positional value, I'm always going to be down to give a guy a shot to prove he can be an offensive tackle before I just peg him at guard. At least that seems like it makes sense to me, because worst case scenario, you just slide him over into a more forgiving position.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And it might be what the team is looking for. It's not that he can't do one or the other. It's more just what the team needs at the end of the day. I do want to mention Markel Bell, the left tackle. who's a prospect that has earned draftable grades from NFL teams. So he's someone to keep on the radar. But I mean, where we are right now, it's mid-December. If I'm a betting guy, I'm going to say Spencer Fano is going to be the first offensive lineman drafted. That's not set in stone. Mauigoa could absolutely push for that. Our guy Vega, Penn State, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he pushes for that, even though he's a guard. That'll hurt him a little bit, but at the same time, he is that good where he could push for that status. So offensive lineman 1 in this draft is far from set in stone, and there's plenty of guys that are still playing ball that can maybe make a push for that.
I have to highlight the irony of me saying I'd rather let a guy fail at tackle, considering the prospect that started our long friendship was Zach Martin, who
That's right.
was an All-American left tackle who never played, or he did wind up playing tackle in the NFL. But point being, he's going to the Hall of Fame for being a guard. So,
Yeah.
not to say any side of this is correct or incorrect, but I don't know. I'm tempted to try a guy at the more premium position if I think he can get away with it. But also, Dane, as good as that is, I think I'm actually more interested in the other side of this thing because I remember saying it a month ago. I am so in on the Texas A&M O-line. And I don't really care who you want to talk about, whether it's Trey Zune, the left tackle, Demetrius Crownover, the right tackle. I believe I just saw that he accepted a Senior Bowl invite. Am I making that up? Yeah.
He did. Potential top 100 guy.
You got Chase Bizantis at left guard. Like, with all due respect to Marcel Reed and A&M's receivers, I mean, they got a boatload of talent, but A&M's offensive line is the star of the show and the reason why they're where they are, in my opinion. And so for these guys to get a chance to go against Rueben Bain and Akheem Mesidor, who are both going to hear their name called in the spring, that's what I'm here for. I'm really excited about that.
Let's have a Rueben Bain conversation.
I thought you might want to. Please enlighten me.
All right. So I finished my regular season evaluation on him, did the second half of Miami's games, and Bain's underwhelming. I mean, he was underwhelming in those games. He got off to such a fast start in September that it was like, I think on my initial top 50 in August, he was 39th overall. Then he got off to that hot start. And it's like, all right, man, this is the best defensive player, him and Arvell Reese, that we've seen through 1 month of the year. The way that things have played out the last few months, I think teams are struggling with, okay, what are we doing with him? I've mentioned on this podcast before, there are several teams that view him as a defensive tackle. Here are his verified measurements, by the way. Okay. He's 6'2", 277 pounds with 30 3/4 inch arms. Those are verified measurements. And those are not a lot of pass rushers look like that. And so
that's not great in my experience, Dane.
Doesn't have prototypical length. It doesn't have some teams are very stringent with how their parameters of their positions, especially on defense, and that it is going to be a struggle for him to be graded highly as an edge rusher for those teams. And so it's like a month ago, 2 months ago, I think we felt good about like this is a top 10 pick. Now there might be a better chance he goes in the back half of round 1 than the top half. Opinions are all over the place on him.
That is interesting considering. And look, I get it. But as hard as we might try and as much work as we might do, I think we're always going to be a step behind like the actual staffs that set these boards and the way the NFL thinks about these things. But this is a guy who has been thought of as a potential top 10 pick. And I think Arvell Reese deserves mention, obviously. But I mean, Rueben Bain he was your placeholder for the guy you were gunning for if you had a top pick in the draft. I think that could come as a surprise to a lot of people to hear that maybe the NFL is not so sure.
And like, it's not that he's a bad player. Like it's when you look at him through a top 10 lens, that's where it's easy to beat up on some of these guys. And with Bain, like I love the motor, love the power in his hands. He can be impactful versus a run, versus the pass. It's just when you break down what you're looking for from an edge rusher, he doesn't have that prototypical length. He doesn't have the prototypical arc athleticism with that teams are looking for. And so it doesn't mean that he's not a good player. He's going to be a good pro. And I think at the end of the day, he will be a first round pick. But I was maybe a little surprised how many day 2 grades there are around the league on Rueben Bain. And so, when we get to draft time and teams stack their board, I don't think they're going to find 32 players better than Rueben Bain, regardless if you think he was a defensive tackle, defensive end, whatever. But at the same time, it's maybe just a little bit different than what we thought. And I think it's fair. I'm not just going based off of what I'm hearing from scouts. Going back and watching the last, especially the last month, it's just been up and down. He hasn't been as dominant as maybe you would expect a player that we're talking about as a top 10 pick. And he doesn't have the traits, the athletic traits, the length that you can point to and say, all right, we'll bet on that. So, and that's draft time, right? And Bain could come back and have a Pro Bowl career and make everyone look silly for passing on him. But right now, with where we are, just need to pump the brakes a little bit with Bain going as high as the top 10.
I hear you, and this is why you're great. You're on top of this stuff. But at the risk of sounding like a broken record, what if he and Mesidor do to A&M what they did to Notre Dame at the start of the season? I mean,
Yeah.
it could be that simple.
And I'm glad you mentioned Mesidor as part of this conversation too, because he wins in more ways than Bain does. Now maybe he's not as powerful. He's not as consistent versus the run, but as a pass rusher, he actually wins in more ways. And so he's going to be a 25-year-old rookie. He's had foot issues in the past, so the medicals will be part of that final evaluation. So he's a little more complicated in terms of just stuff that's not on the tape. But in terms of just what the tape says, he's right there in the day 2 conversation. So Mesidor absolutely is someone that is going to impact this game. And the A&M offensive line, I mean, I'm glad you kind of shouted them out first, and because they've been really good this year. Trey Zune, whether it's left tackle, they worked him in at center as well. He won the Jacobs blocking trophy as the top offensive lineman in the SEC, which really says something. Demetrius Crownover, it's not nearly as consistent with him at right tackle. It's sloppy a lot of times, but we're talking about a guy that's 6'0", so 6'6" and 3/4, 335 pounds, 35.5-inch arms, 84.5-inch wingspan. And he's a former tight end. He showed up to A&M as a tight end before they transitioned him over to tackle. So there's a lot of people that are looking at him and saying, all right, well, he's yet to play his best football. And that's why he has a chance to end up as a top 100 pick and get that eventual starter grade. Don't want to leave out Chase Besantis as well at guard. He's kind of on the fence about if he's going to go back to school or come out. He did not walk. I know Casey Concepcion, he walked on senior night. And he's all but gone, which I think everyone understands that as an underclassman. But Besantis didn't. And so I think he's very much in the decision-making process about what he's going to do about 2026.
Keep an eye on the Aggie offensive line when you watch this game. And that'll be easy to do with NFL guys like Rueben Bain and Akheem Mesidor on the other side of the ball. But they're all fun. Trey Zune's definitely, I'm going to go ahead and claim him as a pet cat heading into this process.
Nice.
If you can play left tackle and center at a high level in the SEC, I'll just take you on my football team and figure out what to do with you later. That's fine.
Well, and he'll be an interior guy at the next level, but he at least gives you 5-position versatility in a pinch. If you need a guy to kick out and play some snaps at tackle, he can do that. You don't necessarily want it long term, I don't think, just the way he's built, but he at least gives you that 5-position flex, and that's critical.
Sure. And I don't, like I said, I don't care at the end of the day,
Yeah.
but I watched Graham Barton this year kick out and play some left tackle and help the Bucks get a win. So yeah, big fan of the Aggie O-line. A couple other things to note in this game. Obviously, I love that we talked this much about the game and we haven't mentioned Carson Beck yet. One more opportunity for him to remind people that he's part of this quarterback class, see what that looks like against a very, very talented Aggie defense. You mentioned Casey Concepcion. I don't know. Who else aren't we mentioning from this game?
Well, I mean, I'm glad you brought up those two names, especially because I would argue maybe those are the two names that could really swing things for their respective teams. Carson Beck, he's no stranger to SEC defenses, but he's never faced or he's never played at Kyle Field, and I don't think he's faced Mike Elko before. Like
Yeah,
those
because I
pressure
don't
packages.
think this is not the point of this show, but I don't think Georgia's ever played in College Station, despite A&M joining
Really?
the SEC in 2012. Like just a
wow.
dumb quirk of the SEC schedule that only a nerd like me would be aware of.
No, but that's relevant. I mean, you're going to a place you've never played before, and obviously it's going to be a crazy environment, but it's probably not. It's probably just a little bit different until you actually do it. And so with that, and Mike Elko's all those pressure packages he brings, especially on third downs, if there's one knock or the main knock against Carson Beck, why we feel like there's a cap on what he could be at the next level, it's the inconsistency with the second reaction plays. And it's a lack of mobility, tendency to turn the ball over in some of those high leverage moments. That probably puts a cap on what he's going to be at the next level. So how does he do against those different pressure packages where, you don't know, the simulateds, where they're going to come from, Howell's dropping in space and someone else is coming from an overload. Like you just don't know. And how is he going to handle that? Is he going to find the answers to the problem? So I very eager to see Carson Beck in this one because there are some scouts that just cannot quit Carson Beck. They see the baseline ability to be a okay NFL quarterback. Not a guy that's going to lift your offense, not a guy that probably ever be a top 20 quarterback in the NFL, but someone that'll probably end up being third round pick, high level backup maybe. There's a lot of scouts that see him in that way. So can he live up to it? And then for A&M, Casey Concepcion, just get the ball in his hands. Marcel Reed, get the ball in his hands. I don't care how you do it. Just there's no reason why he should not have 10 targets at least in this game. He can get open with his releases, with his route separation, and then what he does after the catch is so big. He was first team All SEC, not just at wide receiver, but also all purpose because what he does is punt return as well.
Very familiar with his ability as a punt returner. Unfortunately, it's going to be, like I said, yeah, that's the centerpiece of the weekend for me. Really looking forward to Miami A&M, but there are two more.
I'm sorry. Can I mention two other guys real quick here?
Dane, that's what we're here for. Of course you can.
So A&M, obviously they went into the portal and they go get Concepcion, a few other guys. I think two guys that they got in the portal that don't get a lot of recognition, but I think both will be draft picks. Tyler Oniodum on the defensive line, defensive tackle. Iowa State hated to lose him. He's kind of been the unsung hero of that defense this year. Watching him against Texas, I mean, he was really good stopping the run. I think he's boosted his draft grade in the process. Yeah, early day 3, 4th, 5th round for him. And then on offense, Nate Borkicker, the tight end, who I mentioned before, this is a loaded tight end class. And that's even before we see which underclassmen join this group. But he came over from Nebraska and he catches the ball well through traffic. He's an asset as a blocker. So, he's one of those guys that is just, he could be a true wide tight end in a deep pool of tight ends in this prospect class. So those two guys. And then for Miami, Keontae Scott coming over from Auburn. He's that undersized nickel who makes a ton of plays at the line of scrimmage. The toughness that he plays with, the play speed. You can't help but notice him flying around the field. I know he's banged up, and so not a guarantee to play in this game. That would be a big loss if he's not able to go.
It hurts me to say a little bit, but this A&M team in particular, I mean, look all over their roster. This is just a team that you can tell is going to put a lot of guys in the NFL. And on the fan side of this thing, as somebody who has to compete against that, you just got to tip your cap to what Mike Elko has put together. It's not a prediction for the game because Miami's got plenty of talent too. I I'm really excited for this one. As a fan of college football, but also just for the sheer amount of talent that's going to be on the field. This is definitely the centerpiece of the weekend. But we have two other first round games. I want to state for the record, I'm firmly in favor of the G5 being in the college football playoff. I think it's crazy how many people in the college football world write these matchups off and don't want to see them. Meanwhile, every year we celebrate the first round of the college basketball tournament as one of the best weekends of the year. And by the way, the NFL playoffs are often not all that competitive in the first round. The average margin of victory in the first round of the NFL playoffs since they expanded to 7 teams is 2 touchdowns. The whole point of tournaments is that they get harder as you go. So I do not begrudge Tulane and James Madison for being in this tournament, but for our purposes, there's just not as many NFL prospects on the field for these games between Tulane and Ole Miss, as well as Oregon and JMU. Would you say that's fair?
It's very diplomatic. You could run for office.
I'm not bullshitting either. Like, I genuinely feel that way. It doesn't change the fact that there aren't as many prospects to talk about, but just as a fan of college football, I'm more than okay with these guys being in here.
I mean, I'm fine with it too. There should be a qualifier. Like, you have to finish the season ranked top 20 in the country, or like Boise State last year. Like, they had no problem with them. They had one of the best players in the country. They were a good team. They deserve to be in the playoff. Yeah, this year I think it's just a little bit of a different situation, especially with two of them in there, and a really good team like Notre Dame or Texas, Vanderbilt. I mean, plenty of teams that just missed that. If the goal is to get the top 12 teams, like let's make sure we're getting the top 12 teams.
This isn't the right format for this conversation, but I am always of the opinion I care about deserving more than best. And
Fair.
3 losses, I start to lose interest in your case after 3 losses. I don't care anymore. Don't bungle it. I mean, Texas, it's really admirable that you scheduled Ohio State. You also got your ass kicked by a bad Florida team in the swamp.
Right.
So just figure it out. Miami, you got into the playoff, but maybe you get to play for the ACC title if you don't lose to 2 teams you shouldn't have lost to. And then we're not having this conversation. We're not here to talk about college football, but at least not in that prism, but that's just how I feel.
I don't want to disparage these 2 teams. It's just don't have a lot to talk about because they don't have.
For our purposes, this is not as interesting as it could be. I will meet you there.
Jake Retzlaff is not getting drafted, quarterback for Tulane. I think he's a solid college quarterback, and he will should keep the game competitive, at least for the first 3 quarters with Ole Miss. But we're going to be talking mostly about Oregon and Ole Miss with these 2 games. And I think where do we want to start? Let's start with Oregon. We kind of mentioned Dante Moore earlier, and just how things could play out for him and how that could affect his NFL decision going up against James Madison. So that'll be obviously something to watch. Can the offensive line kind of get right against James Madison? Isaiah World at left tackle. Not even sure he's a top 100 pick anymore with the way he's played this year. Kenyon Sadiq, we know how talented he is. Amari Washington on the defensive line. Thieneman at safety has a chance to be the first safety drafted after Caleb Downs. So plenty of talent. Oregon's also, I mentioned A&M and Indiana competing to be maybe that next team in terms of most draft picks this year. Oregon's right there as well, depending on which underclassmen end up declaring. So this should be a lopsided game just based on the talent.
It's a fun showcase for Dante Moore, but if it goes the way most people expect it to, I remember talking with you in September when Dante Moore was beating the hell out of people, and it was like, okay, but can we see it against somebody with a pulse? And ultimately we did get that big moment against Penn State. This feels like a nice chance for him to reintroduce himself to a national audience, but I think most people will have their eyes on that potential game against Texas Tech more so than this one.
And we'll talk about that in the next pod, but yes, I think that's we're already kind of turning the page towards that. And Ole Miss is kind of the same thing. Ole Miss, there's a lot more question marks about
That's
you know,
I asked you about this in our production meeting, and I'll just
mm,
bring it to the show because you look at Ole Miss, 11-1, slam dunk in the playoff despite losing their head coach, and it doesn't feel as though they have an obvious, no doubt about it, big time draft pick, which is unusual. Like all of these other contenders, obviously, like Ohio State speaks for itself, and Miami and Texas A&M speak for themselves. But even like Texas Tech has these highly draftable defenders like David Bailey. It's strange to me that a team that went 11-1 in the SEC, like Ole Miss, they have good players, but it doesn't feel like they have that guy that kind of drives the conversation.
right. And that's not to say they're not a good team. It's just, yeah, they don't have that slam dunk, no doubt about it, top 100 pick. There are a few underclassmen that are interesting and maybe could get there. Like Deuce Alexander at wide receiver could end up being a day 2 pick. Perkins at linebacker, highly recruited kid. But he's not the most natural pass rusher. He's undersized. Like, what are you doing with him? Like, there's more questions about him than anything. The NFL feedback on Perkins is 4th, 5th round. But with the whole Lane Kiffin of the situation, who's going to be, are those guys going to transfer? Are they going to look to the NFL? They staying put. Trinidad Chambliss. I mean, that's a big domino here. Ole Miss all season thought they were getting him back for next year. What happens with him after Ole Miss season is over? But yeah, in terms of the seniors, the guys that we know that'll be in this draft, Ole Miss, they have a handful of guys that I think will get drafted on day 3. On offense, Stribling and Wallace at wide receiver, they're late round guys. The left tackle, Diego Pounds, as a left tackle who should be in that 6th, 7th round range. On defense, Xavier Harris, big boy, 6'7", 330 pounds. Lot to like about the talent and what he could be, but he's also a day 3 player, a guy that you're hoping could grow into a rotational role for you on your defensive line. And then Daquan Wright, tight end on offense. Those 5 guys should be drafted on day 3. But again, to the original point, they just don't have that no doubt about it, slam dunk, absolutely going top 100 type of guy.
It's just an interesting spot to be for a team that had such a great season in the SEC. And yeah, I mean the Lane Kiffin aspect of it makes it all the more interesting. And I guess we'll see the effect that it has on Ole Miss when their season does end, which doesn't seem like it's going to be on Saturday, given that they have already handled this Tulane team earlier in the season. They beat them, what was it, 45-10 back at the beginning of the year. So, hey, crazier things have happened, though. I am more than open-minded to the idea of some college football madness on Saturday, even if it doesn't seem terribly likely to us right now.
We don't usually do, and I'm putting you on the spot here. We don't usually do like predictions, but can I get your predictions for the first round games? Obviously, I think we're both on the same page. Oregon over James Madison and Ole Miss over Tulane. What about the other two? Who do you think wins those games?
Yeah. Ooh, you are putting me on the spot, and I
I
hate
know.
it. Even with everything we've seen from Alabama over the last month, I'm sorry, Oklahoma, but I think Alabama is better than Oklahoma. And if Ty Simpson can avoid a pick 6 this time around, maybe like I trust Alabama to get this done. And then I really feel like Miami A&M is a true toss up, and I'll just take the home team.
Home team. Yeah.
Kyle Field is a disgusting environment when the Aggies are rocking the way they're going to be rocking. So I don't feel good about that one either way, but I'll take the home team. So I'll say A&M advances to play Ohio State, and I'll take Alabama to advance to play Indiana. That would be my guess.
I like it. I agree with you on A&M. I think it's almost like Ohio State last year where they lose that game to Michigan, and instead of it just tanking their season, they turned it into motivation to go on a run. And I don't know if A&M is going to rip off 4 straight wins here, but I think that it'll be at least enough to get past Miami, and then we'll go from there. So with you there, and then I think I'm gonna go with the home team in I think all 4 games. I'm gonna go with Oklahoma to be another week more healthy and be able to get it done. It's the way Alabama's looked the last month and a half. It's tough. And now they have the talent, so it wouldn't surprise me if they win this game. But it's hard for me to believe they're going to do it with just the few times we've seen them on the field.
I think that's totally fair. If you're an OU fan who's mad at me, I'm sorry. I absolutely think OU could win this game. And to your point, all 4 of the home teams won these games last year in blowout fashion. Like none of them were really all that close as far as I remember. I mean, Indiana made it look a little more respectable than it was. Obviously, Ohio State blew out Tennessee. Clemson hung with Texas for a while. Like it wasn't a complete blowout, but Texas won by multiple scores. So I would not be surprised at all if that holds again this year and all 4 home teams advance. But maybe I'm just holding on to my Ty Simpson priors and just counting on him to bail me out for being too high on him too quickly. I don't know, but we'll see. Either way, it's going to be a loaded, very fun weekend of games. We're looking forward to it. Quick programming note. We will not have a show next week. We're taking the week off for the holidays, but we will be back in 2 weeks. Obviously, we'll have the quarterfinals to preview heading into the new year. Whoever advances, we'll be talking about those games, what matchups await us in that round. And plus, if I had to guess, we'll have plenty more news from around the college football world with declarations or guys deciding to stay in school. 2 weeks is an eternity in this very strange sport. So
that's there will be a lot more to talk about, no doubt. Hey, so this is our last time we'll talk on the pod before Christmas. What's the number 1 seed Christmas movie for you? What do you got?
Oh man,
no, I'm putting you on the spot again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, hey, I love it though. It's got to be Christmas Vacation. It's a big part of my family's lore. I think I watched it with my dad like 5 times a Christmas for most of my young life. So I think I can recite every line in that movie. But I mean, Home Alone's great. Elf is great. The Santa Claus is underrated with Tim Allen, but
100%.
Christmas Vacation's got to be the top spot for me. What about you?
Yeah, no, I think that's the right answer. I mean, I would go, obviously these things are nostalgic and, depending on when you first watch these movies, that plays a part, but I would go Christmas Vacation 1. It's 1A and 1B with that and Home Alone, and then the Santa Claus would be 3. Yeah. So those would be my top 3. So I'm right there locked up.
Nailed it. Wow. We're in a thought bubble here, which
we are.
Don't worry. We will not be that way when it comes time to sort this draft class out. Dane, loved this conversation. I will see you on the other side of the holidays. I hope you have a Merry Christmas, man. We will check in with y'all in a couple weeks as well. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching. Follow The Athletic Football Show wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube.